Okay, I'm going to give you a quick rundown of how I prefer to set up the Soundcraft Signature 22 MTK for recording at home and for mixing and recording live shows. I'll start with setting up for studio recording. I'll be using Logic for my recording software, but the same principles apply anywhere else. On Mac, it's plug and play. You'll automatically see it available as an input and output device. You'll want to make sure you have 24-bit recording checked and that your stereo output is set to go to outputs 21 and 22. It's also a good idea to make sure that your project settings are at either 44.1 or 48 kHz, as those are the two sample rates that this console supports. Just like that, you're ready to go. For an example of how much you can do with this thing, I'll load up a totally preposterous sample session that could be tracked all at once live in the studio. 8 mics on a drum kit, bass direct and with a mic on the amp, an acoustic guitar, a saxophone, 2 electric guitars, 3 vocalists, and a stereo keyboard. For each channel strip, you'll see 24 input options. 1 through 22 are your channels on the board. 23 and 24 are your master stereo mix. You also have 22 return options for routing signals back to the board as needed. Just set each track to go to the stereo output and do all of your mixing inside of Logic. Back to the board itself. Inputs 1 through 20 are free for whatever microphones or instruments you want to plug in. Here I have a drum kit mic'd up with a kick in, kick out, floor tom, rack tom, snare top, hi-hat, and overheads. On this board, the sound comes into the mic preamp and hits the gain knob, and then goes right into your computer. As far as the final audio file is concerned, nothing but the red knob matters. That includes the limiter and high pass buttons and the mute button. You can still record a signal just fine with the track muted on the board. The 1/4-inch jacks are for balanced line level signals. If you want to record a guitar or bass direct, stick to channels 7 through 10 and be sure the high Z button is pressed. Also note the last 2 XLR inputs are part of stereo pairs, so if you plug in 16 microphones, you want to record channels 1 through 15 and then 17, skipping 16 and 18. You'll see what that looks like here in the project. This is why for the example here, the stereo keyboard is listed last, as channels 19 and 20 have no XLR in, just a pair of balanced 1/4-inch inputs. Now, the engineer and performers need a way to hear each other and a click track or any scratch recordings they're playing along with. Remember how we routed Logic's output to the 21-22 return? Make sure that USB return is on for 21-22 and you'll pick up anything coming back from your computer there. You'll want to make sure USB return is off for all of the other channels, as your computer isn't routing any signal there. For reasons that will make sense in a moment, also make sure that your computer is not doing any live input monitoring. Here's where the aux channels come into play. The 22 MTK has 5 independent aux channels, 3 in green and 2 in blue. The blue knobs bust through to the onboard lexicon for reverb, but you can just leave the FX returns muted and use these exactly the same as the green channels. I run these 5 aux lines into channels 1 through 5 of a 6-channel headphone amp. This lets me run 5 completely independent headphone mixes out to the musicians in the room. The backup singer wants to hear themselves the loudest, or the bassist wants a little kick, the drummer needs their overheads piped in a little bit. You get the idea. A major advantage here is that the analog board is handling your input monitoring live. That means your computer doesn't have to do any of that work, which is less stress on your processor and far less chance for latency issues. This board also has a headphone output jack. I run this to channel 6 in the headphone amp, and it's used for myself or the engineer. The headphone output by default will just pipe out the master stereo output, but as soon as you select an AFL or PFL switch, you will only hear that signal. This means that you as the engineer can solo any one of the 5 aux mixes and hear exactly what you're sending to each person. Then, when it's time to hit record, just leave whichever mix you prefer running for the session. One other sidebar on monitoring, Logic lets you reroute your click audio separately from your stereo output. So if you want to be able to set different click levels for different musicians, you just send the click to a different track, say 19 and 20, and hit the USB return on that channel. Then you can adjust the click level with that track's aux sends. If you're curious, the headphone amp I use is the HeadAmp6. It's a really nice pairing with this board. Each of the 6 channels can power 3 sets of headphones, so if you wanted to get real crazy, you could have 18 people monitoring on 5 aux mixes in real time. When it comes time for mixing, the 22 MTK is also great for running multiple reference monitors. When mixing, you'll still have the output coming into channel 21 and 22, and then press the master, group 1, 2, and group 3, 4 buttons so your mix can go out to 3 sets of speakers. I send my master output to my main monitors, group 1, 2 out to a small set of budget speakers, and group 3 and 4 out to a mid-size set. This lets me switch back and forth from full range to what might sound like being in the car or on a TV. Next up, live shows. I run shows on the Signature board exactly like any analog board. You've got a great sounding 4-band EQ, 2 sweepable mid-channels, limiters, high-pass filters. It gets the job done. I just run a regular mix live out to the master output, and that's what the audience hears. To me, it's just a far easier way to see what you're working with and make adjustments in real time with knobs and faders. For monitors, I send aux 1 through 4 back up to the stage and use it for a left, center, right, and drum wedge. Just like with the studio setup, this lets me give separate monitoring mixes to each part of the stage. This means I give up one of the effects sends in aux 4, but I don't feel like I strictly need 2 different reverbs for a live show. You do need at least one though, so I use the onboard lexicon on aux 5 and unmute and turn up the return for FX return 2. As far as the lexicon goes, there are a few options that are really great, a few that are just okay, and a few that are pretty weird and I would probably never use. You can find something that works. Here's the cool thing with this board though. While you're running a show and getting it to sound good in the room you're in, you can also have a computer next to you tracking everything that's happening. Here's what a sample live show session might look like. Remember the signal path. Right after the gain knob, it goes into the computer. So when you call this up later, you can mix as if the band is right there in the house with you. Any mistakes you made or EQ adjustments you had to make to get that weird feedback note to go away, none of that matters for mixing in post. If you want to be able to hear what the audience heard at the show, just record inputs 23 and 24. That's the master signal that had gone out to the house. This makes for some great results in live recordings, where you can put on a killer show for the crowd in front of you, and then mix down a totally different recording for everyone later. Another big bonus here is that with all those return assignments available, you can send audio back from the computer to each channel and out into the house. That means any plugin you have can be used as a live outboard effect. For this reason, for a live show, I do set up logic with each track taking an input and running its output back to the same channel. So if something comes up where I really need to throw on a compressor or an aggressive high pass or something, you can just throw that effect on the channel, hit the USB return switch on the board, and your live mix will instantly have that effect applied. Neato. And that about covers how I use this console. The mic preamps sound great to me, the results are solid. I'll end with a few examples so you can hear for yourself. Let me know if you have any questions or thoughts in the comments, and thanks for watching.
Fake financing, what you can afford, romancing, ever meticulous landscaping, grass that never grew. It's a police state, a White House Nixon and Watergate, a lying dummy with a stupid toupee. What more can I say? They say God created us, but it looks like the ones who raped and cut my ancestors and my brothers, pillaged my sisters and my brothers. They say debate. Alright. we never get around to it. It's the sad rebirth. Never thought I'd live through this. Gone if not for winter. Sawing shoreline wood in a fox fur.